Dr Adriano Cattaneo, épidémiologiste au sujet de la diversification alimentaire. Je vous remercie de vous joindre à nous, Dr Cattaneo. Nous sommes très impatients de vous entendre ici à Paris en avril. Vous avez effectué des recherches pendant 35 ans sur la santé maternelle et infantile. Vous coordonnez le projet qui a conduit à l'élaboration du plan d'action pour la protection, la promotion et le soutien de l'allaitement maternel pour l'Union européenne.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here with you.
Nous entendons de plus en plus d'instructions contradictoires sur l'âge auquel la nourriture solide, les aliments de table, devrait être introduite dans l'alimentation d'un bébé. En France, on dit aux mères que les plats préparés que l'on trouve dans le commerce sont adaptés aux besoins digestifs d'un bébé et qu'elles devraient éviter de nourrir leur bébé avec les mêmes plats que le reste de la famille. Quelle est la crédibilité de ce conseil? Y a-t-il des recherches pour l'appuyer? Quelle est la source de cette recommandation?
Well, first of all, you're actually posing two questions. One is about the age of introduction of complementary foods or table foods. And the other one is about the type of table foods that can be introduced. Let me start with the first one. The recommendation that we get from the World Health Organization, and that has been picked up by many governments and professional associations around the world, including Europe, is that exclusive breastfeeding should continue for 6 months and should be followed up with the continuation of breastfeeding and the addiction of appropriate complementary foods. But we have to remember that that is a public health recommendation. It's important for population means, it's important for legislation, it's important for statistics, it's important for planning and evaluation. But of course, it cannot be applied to every individual child. Any person with common sense can understand that it's impossible that, just 1 hour after completing 6 months of life, every child will be ready to start eating something else in addition to milk, hopefully breast milk. So in fact, as an individual advice, the only thing that we can do is to stick to physiology. That means that we have to wait until every single individual infant is physiologically ready to start introducing other foods, and in fact needs to introduce other foods. We can only understand that by looking at the child and looking at his or her neuromotor development. When a baby is capable of sitting straight without falling one side or the other one, keeping the head straight, and then be able to pick that up, pulling things to the mouth, keeping the food in the mouth instead of spitting it out, and then chewing it and ingesting it. Well, that's the time when the baby is ready. Most babies are ready around 6 months of age, but some babies, in fact, a very tiny minority, can be ready at 4 months, a bit more at 5. Some babies may be late, and they may be ready at 7, 8. And occasionally, you can have a baby who is only ready at 9 and will perfectly survive with only breast milk until 9 months of age. So we have to be very, very careful not to confuse a public health recommendation with individual advice. These are two completely different things. And any doctor or any parent, in fact, who follows a very strict recommendation about 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 months is wrong, because his or her baby may be different. So we have to be very careful about that. Now, having said that, then we have to decide what kind of food is appropriate for that baby. Now, the food that the baby will like is the food that the mother has eaten during pregnancy and lactation. Because during pregnancy and lactation, the tastes, the flavor pass through the placenta during pregnancy and via breast milk during lactation. And the baby is already used to those flavors and tastes. He knows them, or she knows them, and she will accept to eat. In fact, he or she will be eager to eat exactly the things that the mother has eaten for several months before he was born and soon after birth. If we give the baby something different, there will be a problem, because to eat something with a different taste, the baby needs to, first of all, be, let's say, evolutionary sure that that is a safe food, and therefore he will be very, very careful and will not accept everything at the beginning. He or she will need 10, 12, 15 tastes before he makes sure that the food is good, okay, safe, and then in any way later on, when he will be 12 or 15 or 18 or 24 months, he will have to turn back to the food of the family. And so we have a trouble here because we will need a double transition. First of all, a transition from the tastes and flavors of the mother to industrial foods, and then once again another transition to table foods, family foods. I think that we can avoid that by just starting from the beginning with the family foods. So the attention of the person who will support the family introducing table foods and complementary foods, the attention will be on the fact that family foods are healthy. Now, if the family foods are healthy, then automatically the baby foods will be healthy. And it's much better, in fact, to start with the family food than to start with then industrial food. Not that industrial food that don't have a role. I mean, even ourselves as adults, sometimes we don't have the time to prepare recipe, or we are traveling, or we are in a hurry and we have to do something that we would never do as a routine. And that's understandable also for babies. I mean, there's no problem about that. But certainly the normal behavior for a young baby should be to eat family foods. There's no doubt about that. Provided the family foods are safe and healthy, of course. If the family only eats ice cream and McDonald's, then there will be a problem. But we hope that the families will be a little bit wise and will not do that.
Donc, nous sommes d'accord que lorsque nous parlons d'aliments solides, aliments de table, nous voulons dire que ces aliments sont de la nourriture typique pour une famille donnée, les aliments ou repas de famille partagés à table.
The spaghetti al pesto that I cook, those are fantastic for any baby.
Ok. Donc, si j'ai bien compris, la recherche à propos de l'âge auquel les aliments complémentaires, les solides, devraient être introduits est claire sur l'âge moyen dont les bébés allaités exclusivement au lait maternel seront prêts.
As I said before, the World Health Organization recommends exclusive breastfeeding until 6 months of age, but as a public health measure, not as an individual measure. And there is plenty of research in support of that. There are a minority of professional associations, usually, pediatricians who are specialized in allergy, gastroenterology, liver diseases, that sort of things, that would recommend to start with complementary foods or table foods earlier, at about 4 months of age. But first of all, the base of evidence for this recommendation is much weaker than the one on 6 months. And second, it may be right for a very spurious number of babies, those who are at very high risk of allergy, an allergy that has repeated for generations. And it may be perhaps wise for for that limited number of babies to follow the recommendation of these specialized pediatricians. But certainly it's not a recommendation that is valid for the general population.
Y a-t-il des recherches sur l'âge de la diversification pour les bébés nourris partiellement avec du lait maternel et complétés avec des préparations pour nourrissons?
There is very limited research on that. But from this limited research, we can say that there is no difference. In fact, the same sort of principles that we use for a baby who is exclusively breastfed can be applied also to a baby who is mixed fed and to a baby who is formula fed. In general, the needs for nutrients are similar whether the baby is fed in one way or the other one. So there should be no different principles for those babies who are formula fed, exclusively formula fed or partially formula fed.
Y a-t-il des aliments particuliers qui devraient être introduits en premier lieu? Et si oui, y a-t-il une chronologie particulière à respecter?
As a general rule, I mean, excluding those babies with a very high risk of allergy, of which I was speaking before, let's say for the majority of the population where there is not such a high risk of allergy, the type of first food that is introduced, it doesn't matter. You can start with whatever you like. And even there is no particular sequence. I mean, the old idea that you should wait until 9 months for fish or 12 months for strawberries or eggs is now obsolete. I mean, the research has shown that there is no such a need to follow a particular sequence or to delay the introduction of particular foods. But there are certain foods that should have the priority. When the baby is ready for table foods, the nutrients that are lacking are some micronutrients, especially iron, zinc, and a couple of vitamins. So the first food should be rich in iron, zinc, and those vitamins. The idea that we should start with mashed apples or mashed potatoes or mashed zucchini or carrots is wrong, because these foods are not rich in those micronutrients. In fact, the foods that are richer in micronutrients, of the one that I mentioned before, are meat, fish, eggs, foods derived from animals, or also beans, for example, lentils, or nuts, all different sort of nuts. So, provided we prepare those foods in a way that are suitable for the neuromotor skills of the baby, I think that this should have a priority over the other one. But if a family, as I was saying before, is healthy, probably there is a mix of foods that contains also foods rich in iron, zinc, and vitamins. And therefore, if the family diet is healthy, that is also good for the babies. Another recommendation that I would give in terms of table foods, of course, variety and a mix of different foods is the important principle. But also, it's important to have a good proportion of what we call finger foods, and not only foods that have to be given with a spoon. The baby at that age has to develop skills, the ability to grab, to pick up with the fingers, to take to the mouth. And so feeding must be active, must be an active act, not passive. Now, if you use only soups or semi-solids and you need to feed the baby with a spoon, the baby will be passive and will not develop the skills that are needed to be independent later on in eating and feeding himself or herself. It has to be at least a balance of the two things. But if I had to give a preference, I would give preference to food that can be taken by the baby with the hands and the fingers.
Est-il nécessaire pour les parents de réguler d'une quelconque façon la quantité d'aliments solides complémentaires qu'ils donnent leur enfant lorsqu'il ou elle se développe?
Let me respond by asking you two questions. My understanding is that you are a Lecture League counselor.
Oui.
Is that okay?
Oui.
Now, when you advise a mother, a new mother, to breastfeed, you probably tell the mother that the baby can self-regulate the amount of breast milk he or she will take.
That's what we say, yes.
So you sort of assume that a baby, at least up to the age of 6 months, during which time the baby will be exclusively breastfed, he will be able to self-regulate. Second question, you as an adult, do you think that you can self-regulate by the mechanism of appetite and satiety the amount of food that you take?
Oui.
Yes. So why should there be a window between 6 months and 2 years when, people are unable to self-regulate themselves? Like nature and the evolution cannot have, put this sort of a black hole into the life of individuals so that for the first 6 months they are able to self-regulate. From 2 years onwards they are able to self-regulate, and for 18 months between 6 months and 24 hours they are unable to self-regulate. I mean, the ability to self-regulate is a continuum for the whole life. So if a baby who is 8 months old or 12 months old can self-regulate, why do you worry about the amount of food that he has to eat or she has to eat? You just put the food on the table and the baby will be able to self-regulate. That's it. Don't force baby to eat more because they don't need more. And of course, don't give a little bit more if they ask for more. Yeah, that's the simple rule. Self-regulation is the rule for every individual, and we have to respect that, because if we do that and if we don't force or change this capacity to self-regulate, this will be an asset for the future life. Instead, if you disturb that capacity to self-regulate, that will be a problem later in life. So do not disturb physiology. Physiology is something that has to be kept, working silently behind or beyond. Yes.
Donc, si nous convenons que les aliments riches en zinc, fer et en vitamines du groupe B et D sont les plus importants comme premier élément, et si une mère veut absolument mesurer quelque chose dans le régime alimentaire de son bébé, elle devrait penser davantage aux calories et au contenu en nutriments qu'à la quantité de nourriture. C'est bien ça?
The obsession for the quantity of the food regards industrial foods. Because if you're feeding your baby, or if you're following the advice of your pediatrician to feed your baby only with formula, and then when complementary foods are needed with other sort of industrial baby foods, then of course, because these foods are prepared with the so-called right amount of calories, fats, proteins, micronutrients, and so on, then you have to follow the instruction regarding the quantity if you want to feed your baby the right amount of calories, protein, micronutrients, and so on. And of course that is possible because in the label you have all the ingredients listed by amount per 100 grams or whatever. Right. Now with table foods, first of all, that's impossible because you don't have the labels in table foods, okay? My spaghetti al pesto, I don't know how many micronutrients there are. I know that there are micronutrients, but I cannot guess the exact number of molecules of iron and zinc. So that's impossible for table foods. And second, if you give your baby table foods, there will be a variety that is hugely bigger than the variety that you have when you give only formula and industrial baby foods. You have a very, very limited variety of those foods. I mean, you have cereals, you have a little bit of chicken or fish or vegetables and so on, but there's very little variety. While the recipes that you get at home, I mean, when I prepare baccalà alla vicentina or any other favorite recipes at home, and then I have different, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and every week there are different recipes. Then the risotto can be combined in 1,000 different ways, and the sauce for the pasta can have vegetables, meat, fish, whatever I like, depends on what my favorite diet is, family diet is. Then there is no need to calculate everything because the mix and the balance of everything will give exactly the right amount. And added to that, if, as we know, the baby will regulate, the baby will pick up exactly what he needs. I mean, I have videos, that I was given by several mothers that participated in research that I have conducted along the years, showing that, for example, even at the age of 9 months, and even more at the age of 10, 11, or 12 months, from a minestrone, baby will pick up first the beans, okay, with their fingers, or with a spoon when they are able to use a spoon, and then where they will pick up something green, and then perhaps the carrots later on, and then at the end they will eat everything. Or if they eat something, they will eat only the water, okay? But they will not leave out the beans, because it's incredible how capable babies are to select those foods that they need. It's absolutely incredible. So if we prepare, let's say, a weekly diet that includes everything, we can be absolutely sure that at the end of the week, the baby will have exactly the right amount of calories, micronutrients, fats, and proteins that he or she will need.
Pourquoi dit-on aux parents qui devraient introduire des aliments commerciaux préparés en purée?
I'm sure that you have the answer. Marketing is very powerful. The baby food companies, they spend 100 times more than public institutions spend for promoting a good diet. I mean, they don't promote a good diet, they promote their products, of course. And marketing techniques are becoming extremely sophisticated. I mean, the best social psychologists are employed by industry, and they are working not only much better than social psychologists that could be employed by the public sector, and in fact are not employed because the public sector is broke. Okay, so and so we don't have in fact a social psychologist in our team, but there are plenty of them in working with the industry. They are very well paid. They are working with very good team. If they don't have enough social psychologists in the employed by the industry, they pay firms that are with expertise in public relations and social marketing. And it's obvious that by spending $100 compared to the $1 that we spend in public sector, they have a better effect. And that's why now, and this is, the effect is direct through, I mean, for certain food, for certain baby foods and for certain breast milk substitutes, it is legal to advertise to the public. But most important, they have a very good effect by advertising indirectly through the health sector. And they spend more money, in fact, I mean, the baby food industry spends more money for doctors, pediatricians, midwives, nurses, for their so-called education, for congresses, for leaflets, for books, for spreading, disseminating articles, gifts, travels, research, projects of all different kinds and so on. They spend much more on that than on direct advertising to mothers, because they know that if an advice is given by a white coat, it will be probably more convincing than advice given by a person with a bow and tie. And that's why they do that. So the answer is we are living in a society where the marketing is so powerful that it can sort of disturb all our normal way of, eating, and as we were told by our grandmothers. It's a very I'm very worried about that. Very, very worried. But I'm worried not only for the health of our generation and future generations. I'm in fact even more worried for the planet, because all this is not safe for the planet. The planet is filled up with, all sorts of rubbish, contamination, climate changes, and lack of water, greenhouse effect, and the baby food industry is a contributor to that. I'm not saying that it's only the baby food industry. There are many other factors, of course, but baby food industry is a contributor, and if we let it grow indefinitely without posing some limits, it will be a disaster. We have to study physiology once again. We have forgotten physiology. That's a pity.
Je vous remercie beaucoup pour le temps que vous nous avez consacré et pour vos paroles de sagesse. Nous sommes très impatients de vous voir à Paris en avril et de vous entendre parler de toutes les recherches que vous avez effectuées et de votre expérience qui soutient ces recommandations de santé simples, normales et de bon sens.